Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshormilitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Gurvabhishta Sapurakam Guru Ganeshisha Sambhushitam Chincha Chincha Samasta Vera Nipunam Shri Rupa Pantanugam Govinda Biramuchvalam Bharatanam Bhaktyam Mitam Sundaram Vande Vishwa Guruncha Divya Bhagavad Premno Hibichapadam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauda Tvise Namaha. Okay, so we are continuing our reading and discussion surrounding the Siksastakam. And we're in the middle of the third verse, which everybody knows. Chinada, you know the verse, right? You know the meaning. Okay, of course.
I studied it with you in our room together in Nalagiri 15 years ago.
15 years ago. So Trinadapi Sunichena Doriva Sahishnuna Amanina Manatena Kirtaniya Sadahadi. The holy name should always be chanted with humility, tolerance, and respect, in gist. And so we heard Srila Gurudev's explanation here in Revealed Truth, and we heard the beginning of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's explanation here in Golden Volcano of Divine Love. And he mentioned, which is very helpful, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given clear explanation, like why the example of a blade of grass is given for humility, why the example of a tree is given for tolerance. And now Srila Sridhar Maharaj is going to... So now one important point that is coming up is that humility is not something to be applied indiscriminately. Humility, it's not that we will be humble to anything and everything and anyone. Humility must always be properly adjusted. So this is the point Srila Sridhar Maharaj is about to begin discussing now. When our spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, went to Vrindavan in the early 1930s, he rode in a motor car. In those days, this was unheard of for a saint. So now when we go to Vrindavan, they've got everything going on there. It's a little depressing, actually. From our temple in Govardhan, behind it, they've opened this big hotel. It has this big neon, giant neon flashing sign, and so you see everything there, So a motor car is nothing, but at this time, in the 1930s, I think, for anyone to have a motor car, even in the West, it would have been more of a thing, right? You probably had to be pretty wealthy to have a car. So what to speak of in India, which is a relatively poor country? Well, actually, they're quite rich, but it's very disproportionate. And then in the holy Dham, where, people have these stereotypes of, a sadhu is someone who lives in a cave, they walk barefoot everywhere, and they live on buttermilk, etc., etc. There are all these stereotypes surrounding, and this is, more or less what the tradition has been in India. So this, like the way that Saraswati Thakur presented his preaching mission, it was a huge shock, and for many different reasons. This is just one point, but one point, how he modernized the preaching movement, that was something that many found difficult to understand and accommodate. So So this was shocking for like a spiritual leader like Saraswati Thakur to enter Vrindavan in a motor car. And we hear that all the temples closed their doors to him, except for one. That was the Radha Raman temple, which is fairly close to our temple. So that was the only temple that welcomed him and honored him. Everyone else closed their doors to him. One day, a priest insulted our Guru by deprecating the position of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, the preceptor of our highest conception of spiritual achievement. He boasted, "We are not only residents of the Holy Land, but members of the caste of high priests, Brahmins. Therefore, we can offer our benedictions to Das Goswami. He was born in a low-class family, and he himself asked for such a benediction for us." So Raghunath Das Goswami, he is known as our Prayojanacharya. He's one of the six. You've heard of the six Goswamis. They were present in the time of Mahaprabhu, and they stayed for some time after Mahaprabhu left the world. And they were empowered to put Mahaprabhu's teachings into writing. So they're very important for us. And so Raghunath Das Goswami, he's known as the Prayojanacharya, which means the Acharya, the teacher, who has most clearly shown us what is our highest ideal, which namely is Radha Dasyam, the service of Srimati Radharani. So Raghunath has a very important position for us. But this foolish man in Vrindavan, some so-called, wannabe Babaji, he made this arrogant statement based on a prayer, a humble prayer of Raghunath Das Goswami, which Srila Sridhar Maharaj is going to cite. Of course, in great humility, Das Goswami once prayed, Gurur Goshte Goshtala Yishu Sujane Busuragane Swamanche Srinamni Rajanava Yuva Dvandva Shadane Saradambam Hitva Kururatim Apurvam Aptitadam Aye Swantar Bratash Chatubir Abhiyache Dritapada. O mind, my brother, I fall at your feet and implore you, give up all pride and always taste ecstatic love while remembering the divine guide, the holy abode of Vrindavan, the cowherds and milkmaids of Braja, the loving devotees of the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna, the gods on earth or pure Brahmins, the Gayatri Mantra, the holy names of Shri Krishna and the divine youthful couple of Braja, Shri Shri Radha Govinda Sundar. So he's asking for blessings from all these persons and in his humility. And he mentions here the residents of Vrindavan and also the Brahmins. And so this man who was a Brahmin and he lived in Vrindavan, he very foolishly and ignorantly said, "Oh, we can bless Raghunath Das Goswami. I'm a Brahmin and I also live in Vrindavan. This is our position." So naturally, Saraswati Thakur did not take this very well. That priest remarked, "We are residents of the holy abode of Vrindavan and Brahmins as well. So we are in a position to give benedictions to Raghunath Das Goswami." Upon hearing these words, our Guru Maharaj, who was at Radha Kund at the time, began fasting. He remarked, "I have to hear this? This fellow is under the control of lust, anger, and greed. And he says that he can show his grace to Das Goswami, the most respected preceptor in our line, and I am to hear that?" Without retaliating against his remarks, he decided to fast. We also stopped eating, and our whole camp began fasting. Then a local gentleman who came to know that the whole camp was fasting managed to find the blasphemous priest and bring him to our Guru Maharaj. That priest begged to be pardoned. our Guru Maharaj was satisfied, and after showing him some respect, finally broke his fast. At that time, someone told our Guru Maharaj, "They are all ignorant fools. Why should you be so much affected by his words? You should ignore it." Because normally, this is the proper mood to take, right? We shouldn't let ourselves be disturbed by what foolish or ignorant people say. A foolish person says something foolish, so what? It should be like water off a duck's back, or like as that saying goes, dogs will bark. You don't, make a big hoo-ha every time a dog barks, So this person was puzzled, and asked Saraswati Thakur, why did you make such a big fuss about this? You started fasting and everything, and why did you care? What he says. Our Guru Maharaj said, if I were an ordinary Babaji and heard such a remark, I could simply cover my ears and go away. But I am playing the part of an Acharya, one who teaches by example. What justification do I have for riding in a motor car if I do not oppose the remarks against my Gurudev? Repeatedly, he used this expression, why am I driving a motor car here in Vrindavan? He said, had I been a Nishkinchan Babaji, a saint living in seclusion and wearing only a loincloth, I would have given no opposition to this man. To save myself, I would simply leave the place and go elsewhere. But because I am riding in a big motor car in the post of an Acharya, a teacher, I must defend the dignity of the great devotees. I have accepted this charge and can't evade these circumstances. I must face it and do everything in my power that such things may not go on undetected or unopposed. So this is a very important point. Dhanyavad Didi. Morning. So this is a really important point. And this is a question that comes up all the time, actually. This is a question that people they always ask me. The answer is here. And the question is, if we see something wrong or we hear something wrong, what's the appropriate response? And so what Srila Sridhar Maharaj is explaining and demonstrating through this example is it depends upon our position. It depends on our position, it depends on our relationship, in each case. So Saraswati Thakur says, if I was just living quietly as a Babaji, I was living as an individual, practicing in an individual way, I would just avoid hearing this kind of talk. I would just go somewhere else so I don't have to hear it. But I have this position of an Acharya, I have this role I'm playing, so I cannot ignore something like this. I have to say something, I have to do something, to defend the dignity of my Guru Varga and to make it clear that this is not acceptable. So, there's one nice quote of Srila Sridhar Maharaj where he says, we do have some duty to our environment. If we witness something, if we see something, if we are involved in something, then we cannot, we have to accept some degree of responsibility. Like that example is given about, now we're kind of going a little bit into a tangent here, but that's okay, I think. The example of Draupadi, how it's mentioned in the Mahabharata, how, Dushasan was the perpetrator, right? He's the one who was trying to disrobe Draupadi. So you would say, the first response would be, he's the guilty one. He's the most guilty. But in the Mahabharata, it's mentioned that more guilty than him were all of the the wise and elder persons in the audience who knew this was wrong, and they had some position to be able to stop it, but they didn't for whatever reason. Vidusha-san, he's a very ignorant, he was a degraded person. So what do you expect? He doesn't know any better. Of course, there's some culpability there, but not as much as those who know the difference between right and wrong. Like there was this one time, Gurudev, he told how there was this senior devotee in the Mat. This was in Navadvip, and he was, and Gurudev came to find out that he was stealing. So he was in a senior position. He had access to some of the resources, and Gurudev found out that he was stealing some of those for himself. But Gurudev didn't say anything to him. And then that devotee found out that Gurudev had found out. And so naturally, he became pretty on edge. Like, Gurudev knows, but he's not saying anything. And so then he went to Gurudev and he was like, he apologized, and Gurudev just didn't say anything to him. And so then he said to Gurudev, like, oh please, say something. Like, why aren't you saying anything to me? Like, you can punish me or something, And Gurudev said, I won't say anything to you. And he said, because you are not a new devotee. If a new devotee did something like this, then I would explain to them, what's right and what's wrong. But you're an older devotee. You know very well what is right and what is wrong, and you're still doing it. So what can I say to you? And this brings out another very interesting point that, and this is a higher understanding of what spiritual cultivation is about. In our highest understanding of spiritual life, it's not about what's right and what's wrong. Operating on that basis is a very low way to practice, actually. What's the right thing to do? What's the wrong thing to do? This is a lower way of practicing. At a higher level, it's about our inner desire. It's about desire. I'm going to get in trouble if I do that, so I'm not going to do it. That's a lower conception of what religious life is about, what spiritual life is about. But what's actually helpful for me to progress? I'm a part of this too. It's not like there are these laws coming down and trying to control and restrain my behavior. But what's actually helpful for me, sometimes we might complain, we're supposed to, it's a Ekadashi, can't take any grains today, right? We might complain, But that's missing the point. We should be feeling, Ekadashi is good for my spiritual life. So how can I follow this in a way that it's, that is going to be progressive for me, And so that's the level of practice that Gurudev wanted from us. He didn't just want a bunch of automatums in the temple who are following everything properly and they get punished if they break the rules, But he wanted the devotees to be practicing and following with desire and with consciousness. So if this man is doing something wrong and he knows it's wrong, Gurudev's like, well, what can I do? It's not that I'm trying to create this perfectly constructed environment where everything goes the way that I want. That's not the idea. I want to be in an atmosphere, with persons who want to be doing this, So it's a really interesting point for us to think about. Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Akya. Make the words that come from the lotus mouth of Guru one with your heart. Make them one with your heart. Not there are these annoying rules over here that I'm supposed to follow. What a drag, But let me understand how this is actually helpful for me and good for me, and I want to be a part of that too. You could take the same, in that you could use the same idea in education. You could use that as an analogy too. You'll have students who are like, oh, this is such a drag. I just have to get through this. And others and then you have others who are actually appreciating what they're learning and cooperating at the highest level because they want this, Okay. Let's see where we are. Okay. So going back to the main topic. Humility must be adjusted or modified in its practical application. Once, when a Hare Krishna temple was attacked, or like just to add to that idea, like guilt, like sometimes you see that kind of mood, right? Like people practice spiritual, religious life out of guilt, like that's also not the idea, But it's what Krishna consciousness is about love, not practicing because we're afraid or we're guilty, or we feel pressured. Hi Skylar, great to have you back. We don't want to be doing this because, for these lower kinds of reasons. We want to be doing this because we want to be doing it, and that's the kind of spirit that Gurudev was trying to draw out of us. Humility must be adjusted or modified in its practical application. Once, when a Hare Krishna temple was attacked, a gun was used by the devotees to defend the temple. Later, there was a complaint among the local people. They said, oh, they are humble, they are tolerant. Why have they crossed the advice of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be humbler than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree? They can't be devotees. So many complaints were coming to me, but I defended them by saying, no, they have done rightly. The instruction to be humbler than a blade of grass means one should be humble to the devotee, not to a madman. So this incident, and we can add, not that they actually shot anybody, but some ruffians of some kind, they were attacking the temple or stealing or something. I don't remember the details of the incident. This was in Mayapur. Maybe, I don't know if Brajamohini remembers the detail. And so some of the devotees, they used a gun, like to defend the temple. Not that they used it, but then some of the local people, they were up in arms about this. There's the devotees of Chaitanya. They're supposed to be humble. They're supposed to be tolerant. But we're also supposed to be practical. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj also mentions elsewhere, like if someone's coming to attack my father, then are we just going to sit there and be humble to that? No, we have some duty there. In humility, like to the Vaishnava, we will protect. It's a different. It's properly adjusted humility. The general class of men are ignorant, they are mad, they do not know what is good or bad, so their consideration has no value. Who is qualified to judge whether a devotee is offering respect to all and not expecting any for himself? So there's also that famous, right, vox populi is not vox Dei, right? The voice of the masses is not the voice of God. So, and in our modern society, because there's so much exploitation, then democracy is kind of like the best you're going to get, right? But in the ideal society, you have a leader who's actually more evolved than the general masses. Nowadays it seems to be the opposite. The leaders are more degraded than your average person. But so therefore, you just kind of have to go with democracy. It's just the best option, because otherwise there's too much, risk of corruption, exploitation, etc. But in the ideal society, and this is how this was the model of the Vedic society, you have a leader who's actually more qualified than the general mass, and they were supposed to, the king was seen as a representative of God, So then, anyway, we made that point. Who is qualified to judge whether a devotee is offering respect to all and not expecting any for himself? Who will judge whether he is really humble and tolerant? Madmen? Ignorant people? Have they any sense to judge who is humble, who is tolerant, and who is respectful to others? There must be a standard by which to judge humility. We are interested in the criterion given by higher thinkers, not the consideration of the ignorant masses. Of course, anyone may deceive the ordinary public with superficial humility, but a show of humility is not real humility. And this is a point that Gurudev also made, he mentioned of these three qualities, humility, tolerance, and respect. He said tolerance was the most difficult because you can't pretend to be tolerant. You can, you're tolerant or you're not tolerant. You can pretend to be humble. You can make a show of humility, and you can make a show of respect also. It's very easy to do that, You can, just do it like in a fake way. It's easy to do, But tolerance, you can't pretend to be tolerant, If you're intolerant, then you can't help yourself. You just come out, with whatever it is that is disturbing you. And we can mention here, sometimes, Srila Sridhar Maharaj is making this point about, our humility must be genuine, right? And my brain. Humility must be genuine, it must be from the heart. But we can also add that sometimes, like in a social environment, just to be practical, it can be helpful to, if somebody needs respect, we give them respect, if it's going to like defuse a situation, then we can be humble in our dealings with others. We may not necessarily feel everything that we say to them, but in order to keep harmony, within, any type of, and this applies in any type of group. We're speaking in a spiritual context here, but in any type of, organization, any group that is trying to achieve something in a united way, following these things just help in a very practical way, just helps to keep harmony. So like I've heard Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he used, Gurudev would speak about that, and also Srila Sridhar Maharaj used this phrase I appreciated. He said, shastric tolerance. Like tolerance based on scriptural understanding. It means we may not necessarily be feeling it in our heart, but like we're applying it in a theoretical way, based on our theoretical understanding. It will be helpful if I don't explode in this situation. If I don't want the situation to escalate, then it will be good if I give respect to this person, or whatever it may be. So sometimes it's not that we're just meant to just, let it all hang loose all the time, and just say whatever we think and do whatever we want, There is a place for expressing our heart, of course, but, everything must be in the proper context,
A lot of people feel like they need to, for some comfort, that it's necessary to express like your feelings and all this, but if you know if that is going to just cause, if someone isn't going to hear that,
right?
It's just like because you want to express it because you feel like you're right, and the person's wrong, but you know that it's going to make the situation worse, and you know that other person's not going to hear that, then it's making the situation worse.
Yeah.
So, to me, it's like sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, then you're serving that negative emotion, that kind of whatever is boiling inside of you. You're, instead of trying to douse it, you're just adding fuel to that.
I think some people don't realize. I think some people think that by expressing it, it makes things better. Like, it's better not to keep it inside. It's better to get it out. It's better to be honest. But like, it's not usually better, actually. I think that's like a misconception that's like kind of in the world, you know.
Yeah, it can be.
Unless someone is prepared to hear it, and that's also kind of like this plane of justice, like, you know, well, I'm right, and I gotta say that I'm right, and I gotta prove that I'm right, and I've gotta prove that other person wrong. Like, that's kind of this plane of justice that we're attached to, you know.
Right.
And like taking a step, trying to like appeal to the plane of mercy, like, okay, maybe I am right, maybe I'm not right. What does that even mean? Like, is that like trying to prove that? Is that gonna what is that gonna do if that's gonna not create harmony? Like, how is that gonna please Gurudev? Like,
Yeah.
we want to try to have harmony, and whether I'm right or wrong, whatever.
Yeah.
That's not gonna, like, by trying to prove that or trying to express that or trying, you know. So anyway, it's interesting to see, because, you know, different conflicts come, and sometimes people like to want to express it, want to talk about it, want to like this, that, and the other thing, but a lot of times this is like, you have to step back a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have to have that sensitivity to you know, read the environment, and are these persons going to be able to hear this? Is it going to be progressive? You know, all of these things. You know, but it can be difficult, because then, like, some people will say, oh, if I don't say everything I'm thinking, I'll get sick. You know, like, some people will say things like that, you know. And what I would say is, you know, we need to develop better mechanisms for processing our, you know, healthier and more progressive mechanisms for channeling our feelings, you know. And you know, and often things can be said, but in the right way at the right time. But when you're in that burst of emotion, you know, it's not a good idea. You know, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. If you can be kind of calm and neutral while kind of expressing that, like not letting the emotion consume you while you do it, then it can be good to not let it, you know, eat you away on the inside, to still get it out there, but not like burst it out there, you know.
There's another nice line of Srila Sridhar Maharaj in another place where he defines humility. I discussed this with you, actually, Braja Mohini Didi, before, where he says, I will not be so rigid so as to not be able to accommodate others. No. So this is also an expression of humility, being able to like accommodate the feelings and the mood, the need of all the persons who are interacting in this situation. Not just, you know, how I'm feeling right now, but we have to, you know, consider and adjust to everyone else's perspective as well. Perspective and also their feelings. So that is also an expression of humility. Because then, you know, the opposite of humility is when we're only able to see ourselves, right? And that just overrides, that supersedes everything else. You know. Okay, well, here, read a little bit more. Everything, humility, tolerance, and pridelessness must be considered by the judgment of a standard normal person, not by the ignorant who are like elephants, tigers, and jackals. Should they be allowed to judge what is humility, what is audacity, and impertinence? Of course not. Should a devotee think the deity and the temple is about to be molested, but I shall stand by and do nothing, I should be humble and tolerant. This is not real humility. We must have a normal conception of reality. We must not allow these anomalies to continue in the name of offering respects to others. We must not think that we may allow anyone to harm the devotees or molest the temple, that we shall allow the dog to enter the temple, and by doing this we are humble and tolerant. We are showing all respects to others. We are not interested only in the physical meaning of the scriptures, but in the real meaning. That I am humble means that I am the slave of a Vaishnava. With that consciousness we must proceed. If anyone comes to molest my master, I should first sacrifice myself, thinking, because I am of the least importance, my sacrifice is no loss. I must sacrifice myself to maintain the dignity of my guru, the devotees, and my Lord and his family. We must always understand what is to be honored. We offer our respects to the highest truth, the Lord of Lords. Our dealings should be in consonance with that. If we always keep the highest conception of relativity within us, we will see that we are the lowest. If there is danger to our guardians, we shall sacrifice ourselves. All of this should be taken into account when trying to understand the meaning of humility. Not physical imitation, but genuine humility. It is a question of practical realization. Fame and honor must be given to the Lord and his devotees, not to anyone else. In the higher stages of devotion, of course, humility may have to be adjusted in another way for the Paramahamsa Babajis, the topmost swan-like saints who have given up all connection with this material world. But in the preaching stage, the second-class devotee must accept things differently. As our Guru Maharaj said, had I been in the role of a Babaji, a non-assertive, reclusive saint, I would have walked away from the place without offering any opposition. But when we are preaching and have taken the responsibility of leading so many souls to the domain of the Lord, our adjustment must be made accordingly. Generally, we may be indifferent to those who are personally inimical to us, but when we preach on behalf of the Lord in an organized way, our duty changes. We cannot be indifferent to antagonists. So, if somebody is insulting us, we will try not to be disturbed about that. But if we are in a position where we are representing our Guru, we are representing the Lord, the devotees, then we may need to take some stand, to defend their dignity. We may not defend ourselves, but if our friend, if our beloved, someone beloved to us is being disturbed, then it is appropriate that we will protect and defend. It is mentioned in the scriptures by Jiva Goswami that according to one's own particular status, these things should be taken into consideration and the necessary things should be done. He has given his decision that if the devotee has a position of power, if he is a king, and if someone repeatedly blasphemes a real Vaishnava or saintly person, then the king should enforce corporal punishment by banishing the offender from his state. That is not the duty for ordinary persons. If they act in such a way, there will be a riot. We should not be eager to inflict personal punishment upon anyone. Hanuman is a Vaishnava, but he is seen to destroy so many lives. The same is true of Arjuna and so many other devotees. Even Krishna and Ramachandra are also seen to kill so many demons in war. Simply a physical show of meekness does not constitute the real meaning of humility. When there is an insult to the Guru or the Vaishnavas, a devotee will oppose the blasphemers according to his might. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in one of his songs, says that we should not only tolerate the evil doings of others in a disturbing environment, but we should do good to those by whom we are being tortured. So this is the positive conception of tolerance, that not only are you tolerating, but you also have compassion. You want to help the person who's giving disturbance. This is a higher conception of tolerance. The example is given of a tree. One who is cutting the tree gets shade and comfort from the tree, even while cutting it down. In conclusion, he says that humility, mercy, respect for others, and renunciation of name and fame are the 4 qualifications for chanting the holy name of Krishna. We are the meanest of the mean. We should always be conscious that we are beggars. We should think, although I am a beggar, I've come to beg for the highest thing. Let no disturbance dissuade me from my attempt. At the same time, our attitude toward the environment should be respectful. In this way, by becoming educated in the Krishna conception of divinity, everyone should be given respect according to his position. It is the guiding instruction in the worship of the holy name that we must take the position of the slave of the slave of the slave of the Lord. If you want to chant the name of Krishna, then don't waste your energy with the trifling things of this world. Don't allow your attention to be disturbed by tiny acquisitions like prestige or gain, which are relative to money or physical comfort. Remember, you are trying for the greatest thing, and all other things are very small in comparison to Krishna consciousness. So don't waste your energy and valuable time. Be economical. You have the chance to achieve the highest goal of life. I like this very much. I remember this sometimes. Be economical. Don't be caught up with so many trifling little things, disturbed by so many things. But we have limited time, limited energy. Let us use that in the highest cause. Okay. Any last comments or anything? Should we close there for today? So then tomorrow we'll come to the 4th verse. Jai Shri Siksastakam Ji, Jai Shri Bhakti Rakshak Shridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Who's going to sing? We didn't hear from Brajamohini Devi today. Sing.
Hare Nama Krishna Jadavaya Namaha Jadavaya Madhavaya Shavaya Gopal Govindaram Srimad Sudanam Giridhari Gopinath Giridhari Madanam Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sangha Shri Chaitanya